You have likely heard it said that nature abhors a vacuum, that Mother Nature simply cannot allow gaps to remain unfilled. And yet, despite this natural animosity to this vacant space, we live in a world that is filled with empty spaces and gaps. Indeed, it is the very play of absence and presence that allow us to read the text. For the gaps in the white space on the paper bulletin in your hands are necessary to allow the letters and characters to emerge and for your eye to discern meaning instead of just a blob of black text, ink. Despite the many gaps of the world, the human brain also abhors them. It's always busy filling them in to create perception of the worlds upon which the world depends, through its intelligent guesswork. For instance, if I were to pull out an oval-shaped white or brown image like this, your brain can easily determine that this is indeed an egg, huevos, right? Even if it were colored in multicolors, your brain would know, because it's Easter Day, that it's an egg. The brains are amazing. And I have to be careful because this one is not hard-boiled. If I put it down roughly, we'll have a mess that Jesus can't even resurrect. Our brains are amazing because they can hone in instantly on the correct answer. And it does it so lightning quick that this guesswork can be unconscious. And we have these assumptions that are using the data of the natural world that we've gathered from previous sensory encounters and then recollect. Through studying visual illusions on the brain, scientists have discovered more about the manner in which the brain deals with these inexplicable gaps in the retinal image when we get new information. It's a process called infilling. If you've spent time with babies coming into consciousness, you know that you can literally observe this happening in their faces when you play a simple game of peekaboo. For when you disappear, you can see their brain struggling under the gap that's been created by your disappearance. And even as you reappear, they rejoice and know what to expect. I find this play between presence and absence so enticing, especially on Easter morning. For the Easter story is a story all about gaps and the play between absence and presence. No matter which gospel writer is relaying the details, at the center of the story, there is an empty tomb, a gap, a space, an absence. And how we respond to it and interpret the data is telling. The story is familiar enough that we sometimes domesticate it, just like we do the world in which we live. Many of us have made our worlds so familiar that we hardly seem to notice it anymore. We never pause to notice the beauty or the wonder. We allow our overly efficient brains to quickly fill in the world for us as our constant march for progress leads us on a quest for mastery and productivity. I wonder, when was the last time that you saw the world instead of allowing your brain to construct it for you? When was the last time you were like a baby, delighted in the appearing and disappearing of objects in space? An interesting question to ask yourself tonight, and perhaps every night, is this: what did I really see today? What did I really see? This question is the start of a spiritual awakening that will give your heart greater peace as you learn to behold the world instead of merely walking or running through it. Let's practice now by really looking at the Easter story. In each telling, we start with the same female protagonists, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, who were on their way to the tomb. Unlike in the other tellings, in Matthew's gospel, they're not going to anoint the body, but merely coming to see the tomb The Greek word here carries a more formal connotation, meaning they come to watch, to observe, to hold vigil. What a wonderful suggestion. What an amazing way to walk through the world. They came to see. And what they discovered was an absence. And in seeing the gap, the women literally experienced the world shaking. All of their expectations are upended, and their brains simply cannot fill in from past experience. To them, the angel looks like lightning, a sizzling power fraught with danger and wonder. In the Greek text, pivotal words like aioudu, translated as suddenly or behold or look here, cannot convey the untranslatable truth in this sequence of events. Light has split a crack in the universe, and everything we thought we knew is changed. This story contains two such moments. Suddenly, there was an earthquake, and suddenly, Jesus met them. Bringing those together, in other words, we know that to meet Jesus is for the ground to move underneath you. Nothing remains as it was. I want you to notice two elements that fill the spaces between these suddenlies. One element is fear. The text says, "For fear the guards shook, and do not be afraid." And they left with fear and joy. The second element is vision, as in, "Come, see the place. You will see him, and they will see me." Even in what the angel says, you are looking for Jesus, the verb sense and tense here is that of seeking what once you had in hand and is now lost. Looking for and yearning, fearing and seeing are entwined in the presence of the holy in the story. Perhaps we can hear in this construction from St. Matthew an assertion that we cannot see what is truly important without also experiencing fear, awe. We cannot meet Jesus without being shaken. That these two human capacities are linked is evident in their being tied together in this crucial experience for Jesus' followers. Even the word suddenly has a visual quality to it. The thing that appears, it means, to the characters in this scene is as palpable and unmistakable and fear-engendering as lightning itself. It's easy to imagine these kind of sudden encounters with the unnerving presence of the divine, and they are products of some unscientific past. Or that these stories are confined to the pages of Scripture. But I want to assure you that they're out there. I myself have glimpsed and experienced the awe of Jesus' living presence, as you have too, maybe. Just over a year ago, I went on a 3-month sabbatical from work to literally create a gap in my life so that I could pay attention to what I was seeing. I set out for 3 solo weeks of travel, starting out in Ireland. As well as sitting in many pubs with a book in hand and a Guinness on the table, I spent a lot of time wandering and wondering around the Connemara countryside. In looking online, I discovered that there was an 8-hour hike that caught my sense of attention just 20 minutes drive from where I was staying. It's called the Glengoyne Horseshoe, and it traverses 6 mountain peaks, and you can see it just around. It doesn't look that far to the eye as you stand there, but when you start to hike it, it's far. Although the trail is not marked, the online guide said that you can't get lost because it's a horseshoe, as long as the weather held. Before hitting the trail, I packed 2 lunches, listening to my inner voice from my wife, and several liters of water. And before heading out, I read a quick meditation by the Jesuit priest, Richard Rohr. It was entitled, "Behold." In the essay, he shared an ancient spiritual practice that he learned from a wilderness guide, Bill Plotkin, where he invites us to draw a symbolic line in the sand and to truly expect things on the other side of that line to show themselves as special, invitational, and even like a kind of manifestation. And so when you cross that line, we start beholding. Beholding. And someone who is truly beholding is silenced with the utter gratuity of the thing. We let it give us a leap of joy in our heart and in the eye. And once we decide to behold, we're available for wonder and awe and to be present to what is without the filter of our preferences or that false ledger of judging things as important or unimportant. A much broader, much deeper, a much wider field of perspective opens up, becoming an alternate way of knowing and enjoying, becoming, I would say, abundant life. However, I must admit that I was skeptical, but I tried it before setting off on the hike. Instead of marking a line on the ground, I found a pile of sheep poop droppings as my beginning. I thought it might fertilize the walk in my imagination. As I stepped over that pile, I invited the absence of the wilderness to be present so that I might simply behold. It was the most amazing hike of my life. In fact, it might have been one of the most meaningful days of my life. I wish I could tell you about it. But if I'm being truthful, I can't tell you much of anything. The words fail. I experienced the awe and fear of being in God's presence. Each time I crested one of those peaks, I felt a sense of satisfaction and presence, which made it all the more difficult to descend into the gap between the next present peak and the next one, knowing I had to hike up again. By the time of the fourth peak, not only was I exhausted, but the famous Irish weather rolled in, and thick fog covered, and I couldn't even see the hand in front of my face. I made a quick FaceTime call to my wife just in case something perilous happened, and I pressed on. Although I was terrified of falling off the cliff face I was scaling, I kept myself open. I beheld absence, not just out there, but in here. And there I discovered God's presence. I really do wish I could communicate what that day was like and what it means to me. Just like I'm sure the disciples struggled to talk about what happened to them in any meaningful way. But the truth is, the resurrection is not something you can really talk about. It's not something that you can prove. It's like an emptiness, an empty tomb, a gap. It's something you can only experience, something you can only behold. I don't know what gaps you're experiencing in your life today, for I'm sure there are many. Gaps of time that are erupting and emerging. Maybe you've got children getting ready to go off to college. Maybe you're remembering a loved one who isn't here with you this Easter. Easter is a time of both presence and absence. And we experience the resurrection of Easter not as something, though, that's in the past, nor that's even present. The mystery of the resurrection is absence. It's a gap waiting for you to discover it. So whatever the gap is in your life today, know you're not alone. That is the very vehicle which God is speaking to you and through to connect with you. The new resurrected life is emerging. Will you behold it? Will you pause to see it? Will you let the whole world be wild enough, scary enough, and unknown enough for you to behold it? I want to close with a blessing from the Irish poet, John O'Donoghue, who was a traveling companion with me, not physically, because he's moved into the greater nearness of God, but he left behind his poetry and his books. This is his blessing. It may be upon you today. May you know that absence is alive with hidden presence, that nothing is ever lost or forgotten. May the absences in your life grow full of eternal echo. May you sense around you the secret elsewhere, where the presences that have left you dwell. May you be generous in your embrace of loss. May the sore well of grief turn into a seamless flow of presence. May your compassion reach out to the ones we never hear from. May you have the courage to speak for the excluded ones. May you become the gracious and passionate subject of your own life. May you not disrespect your mystery through brittle words or false belonging. May you be embraced by God in whom dawn and twilight are one. And may your longing inhabit its dreams within the great belonging of now. Happy Easter, everyone. Amen.